And it says we are live. Okay, so recording is up, and happy Purim, or Purim Sameach, or you'll hear people also say Chag Purim Sameach. Today is a holiday. It's not one of the ones that is very famous outside of the Jewish circles, because this is the holiday of Purim where we celebrate the story of Esther. We talked about this, if you were here, about 2 weeks ago. And if not, just go back a couple weeks in the YouTube videos and you can catch up on the story of Purim. But there's a very interesting phrase right at the end of chapter 8 of the book of Esther, where it says that as the battle is is opening up, and the Jews are able to fight back and defend themselves against all of the people who had been allied with Haman, that many people became rather fearful. And in fact, many people joined Judaism at that time. That there seems to have been almost we can't use the word mass conversion because we don't convert like 100 people all at once, but it seems like many people individually all decided to convert during that time period as they witnessed the change in power and recognized that, hey, you know what? Everyone thought Judaism and Jews were all going to be wiped out, and now they're the ones who have the upper hand. Maybe there's something to this religion. Maybe their God kind of idea is a good idea because they're surviving. So I thought in honor of that, we would wonder why the computer decided to stop displaying. Please, display. Thank you. Technology, it's my friend. So I thought we would talk about the topic of conversion and see exactly how Judaism handles conversion. Like I said, Judaism always handles conversion on the retail side, never the wholesale. We don't ever just say, all right, all 1,000 of you, you're Jewish now. Each person has their own individual path, their own individual journey, and their own individual experience of going through the process of becoming Jewish. And we'll talk about what it means for an individual, although, of course, it will apply to any individual who is going through it. Now, go forward. Next slide. You're going to make me tap. And then it jumps. Okay, conversion. Officially, legally. Conversion is when someone who was not already Jewish becomes Jewish. Pretty obvious, right? He or she is now bound to God exclusively. And when I say God, of course, I'm talking about the God we refer to as Adonai, the Yud, He, Vav, He, the four-letter name of God. Not just whatever you imagine God happens to be, but our concept of God as expressed in the Torah, which leads us to part 2. When someone converts, they're now bound to the Torah as a path of life, and they are bound to the Jewish people as extended family. I'm going to unpack each of these, but those are the 3 basic parts that are necessary for someone to convert. They have to be connected to God in the Jewish way. That Jewish way is expressed by the Torah, and that has to be the pillar of how they guide their life. And that life needs to be connected, enmeshed, and bound together with all the rest of us. For different people, some of those are harder than others, and some of those are easier than others. But it takes the whole package to make somebody who wasn't Jewish become Jewish. All right, so let's talk about God. God, our God alone, just that. Right? A convert has to give up all belief and practices associated with any other religions. So if someone had been born Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever it might have been, even though Judaism respects other religions, if you want to be Jewish, you have to leave those religions and their practices behind, which means there's no Christmas, there's no Ramadan, there's no celebration of any holidays that's associated with any other religion. Even if they didn't feel that there was something problematic in it, it's like, well, you know, I just want to fast for a month. That's not the issue. The issue is that there has to be a focus entirely and exclusively on our God in the Jewish manner. And that means there's also no communion, there's no saints, there's no importance to Mecca, there's no other practices that are together. When someone converts to Judaism, they don't go on Easter egg hunts anymore. They don't have a Christmas tree. They don't participate in those kinds of activities. It doesn't mean that other members of your family, your cousin wants to have a Christmas tree in their house and you're visiting to say hi to them during that time of the year, perfectly fine. It just means the Christmas tree is not in your living room and it's not your tree and it's not your practice, it's theirs. As I like to explain it to our kids in the school, it's like visiting someone else on their birthday, right? It's perfectly fine to visit a family member, a friend, or anyone else when it's their party, as long as you know it's their party, not yours. And also as long as your family knows it's not yours. Sometimes families can still be a little clingy when someone is leaving one religion to become Jewish. And they still sort of expect that you're going to, well, you're still going to come to Mass, right? It's like, well, no, actually, that's kind of what leaving it behind means. I'm not leaving you, the family, behind, but I am leaving the religion behind. Very important distinction, and one that if you need to talk to me about how to talk to your family, about making sure they understand that you are still with them, even as you are moving towards Judaism, I'd be more than happy to set up a private discussion for that. It also means those beliefs of the Trinity or shrines or other types of prophets or gods, that all has to go by. So the holidays, the practices, and the beliefs of any previous religions have to be removed before someone becomes Jewish, because the focus has to be on our God only. Right? That God, Adonai Echad, God is one. We mean that not just as we only have one God, but as there is only one God. It's a totality of unity. Good? Okay. The Torah also alone, meaning that we believe that a righteous Gentile, somebody who is not Jewish, can believe in God alone. Right? There are many people out there, and thank God for them, who believe that there is only one God, and they believe that that is the same God that we believe in. And they may even believe about that God the same way that we believe about God. But a convert has to also accept Torah as the foundation for how to live according to God's commandments. So it's sort of like saying, I believe that there is a Queen of England. I believe that, right? I've seen her on TV. I've read books about the royal family in England, and I am 100% convinced that there really is a Queen Elizabeth II, and that she is the Queen of England. But she's not my queen. And I know she's not my queen because I don't follow her rules. I don't follow her laws. It's true that officially she doesn't actually make the laws, but also officially she is kind of the head of state of England. And so if I were to have a British passport, then she would be my queen. If I were to follow British tax laws, if I were to follow British corporation laws, she would be my queen. If I don't follow her laws, she's not my queen. Doesn't mean I deny she exists. It just means she has no real impact on my life. In Judaism, the Torah is God's laws. God has given us instructions of how to live. If we accept God not only as God, but as our ruler, then that means accepting God's rules, accepting the Torah. And so for Judaism, the Torah has to be the way that we express ourselves religiously in order for a person to be a member of the tribe, as we say. That means both the written and oral Torahs are essential to understanding the mitzvot. You may remember, and if not, it's a good review. The written Torah is the actual text we have on the scrolls in the sanctuary. The oral Torah is embodied within the Midrash, the Mishnah, the Talmud, and other discussions of how do you translate this into action. How do you take what are often very short sentences or small pieces of law and make sure you can apply them correctly in all situations. And so that oral Torah, that additional layer of explanation and instruction, we believe went hand in hand with the written Torah, and that means you need both. This is something that a number of people will get caught up on. Many people will think that if I just read the Torah, I can know what I'm supposed to do all by myself. Judaism says, good luck with that. There is no magic way to read the Torah by itself and think you'll come to the correct answers or even an answer that the person next to you might agree with. Did someone just pull up?
Yeah.
Okay, park. Parked over there. All right, let me get the door. I'll remind them about punctuality.
So you come to the blessing of God. Go to the one we that we hear like twice. They so good. Like they have a lot of love.
Yeah, that's very nice. To know more people.
Okay. So we need both parts. And if you go back to some of the first one or two classes that I did on this Pathway to Judaism course, you can see a review of where we see the oral Torah and how. If you could also shut the door so that the AC doesn't all leave us. No offense to people who live in colder parts of the world, but we need air conditioning right now. And that also means, because of our allegiance to Torah, that study and honest debate are necessary to truly understand. No one learns how to be Jewish without effort. It's simply not possible. There needs to be always some time set aside in order to not only read the Torah, but to understand it, to unpack it. And in Judaism, we believe very strongly that that doesn't happen by yourself. That to actually understand the Torah means you need to talk to someone else about it, preferably someone who will tell you if they think you're wrong, which I know nowadays people don't usually seek out people who disagree with them. In Judaism, we bless them and thank them, because someone who disagrees with me sharpens my understanding. And you know what? I am wrong about things sometimes. And if someone else can't tell me that, or if I'm not willing to listen, then I will stay wrong. And if I stay wrong, then I'm not being the best person I could be. We good? Okay. Now, also, the Jewish people plus. Now, notice I didn't say the Jewish people alone. God alone, Torah alone, the Jewish people, and. There is a plus sign here. Judaism does not say that you should only think about other Jewish people. This is a common misconception, also a common hate speech against Jewish people. Just people believe that we only think about Jews and we only care about Jews. That's not true. What we do say is that we see ourselves that we are more closely linked to each other than to non-Jews, right? This is like a family, right? I hate to point this out to you, but you know, my affection and closeness to my wife, to my kids, to my mother, my brother, that's closer than to people who are not my wife, my kids, my mother, my brother, and or other family members. That there is a closeness that comes from being part of a family, at least in an ideal good family, that is stronger as a bond than for people who are not part of that family. And Judaism sees itself as being an extended family. So therefore, it is only natural that there will be a closeness to other Jewish people, which is a little different than how we feel about other non-Jewish people. But this family not only looks after itself, but also cares about the city, the country, the world, and everything else. One way to think of this is concentric circles, right? We have to think of ourselves first, right? If I don't eat, if I don't take care of my health, then I can't be any good to anyone else. But once I am basically okay, I can also take care of my family. My family and we can be part of a community. My community altogether, we can be part of the city, the county, in America, a state, the country, and the world. There are different outward pourings of our concern and connection, but each one's built on the strength of the previous level. And in Judaism, we believe that the strength we have together is something that helps us connect and be good for the rest of the world as well. We are not meant to turn inwards. We are not trying to hide from the rest of the world. We want to be a part of the rest of the world while also still being distinct, while still being ourselves. And that's something that we think is a good thing for us and for the world. So how does this work? How do we have our connection to the Jewish people when someone is converting? Well, belonging to a synagogue community, that's rather essential. Converting just privately, I only want to talk to the rabbi and read my books and watch the videos, but I don't want to come to services. I don't want to go to any of the social activities. I don't want to do any of the different programs that we're doing. I don't want to participate in group study. That doesn't really work. Right? It's like joining a family without actually meeting the other members of the family. That's just not how families are. Judaism believes very strongly in the individual spiritual path, but it also believes very strongly in hugs. Not always literally hugs, but the idea that you got to be together. And there are many parts of Jewish life that can only be best done when we are in a group. We are very, very groupish, and you'll just have to put up with that as part of what Judaism says. We also give tzedakah. Tzedakah is often translated as charity to help Jews in need around the world. You'll see people all the time saying that there is a Jewish family in need here, or there is a cause for a Jewish community in this part of Europe or in this part of Asia, or there is a need for education for these Jewish people in Africa. There are many things that we will try to do to help them around the world. And of course, we support the state of Israel's existence and its prosperity. You'll see people who will buy Israel bonds. That's a form of investment that helps Israel. People will support things like the Jewish National Fund, which works on not Jewish, but Israeli infrastructure projects that try to help the country flourish and be strong. And you'll see people supporting the equivalent of the Red Cross in Israel, Magen David Adom, the Red Star of David, and other types of programs. But that doesn't mean we can't criticize. You will find plenty of people who are Jewish who will criticize different parts of the state of Israel or the current government of the state of Israel. It is quite a hobby for most Jewish people, the same way that most Americans will criticize our own politics, regardless of what party you're involved in. Most Jews will also have something that they will criticize about the state of Israel. That's fine, that's healthy. Remember, I said debate is important. But there's a difference between criticizing policies and criticizing its existence. As Jews, we absolutely believe that Israel has the right to exist and the right to exist where it is. We also want its existence to be something that ideally will bring peace to itself and to its neighbors. And that is something that we hope and we all work towards achieving, even if we disagree on the best policy for that to happen. Good? Okay. The first example that we see of a clear and explicit conversion to Judaism comes in the Tanakh, in the book of Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite. Moab was a country just to the east of Israel. That is to say, it's about where modern day Jordan is, or at least part of modern day Jordan. And Moab was a kind of a love-hate relationship. They were technically related to us through Lot, that was Abraham's nephew, but we never quite got on well with that other country. And when we were leaving Egypt, they were pretty absolutely horrible to us. And so this left a very long-term animosity between the people of Israel and the people of Moab. So for the character of Ruth to be from Moab and for her to decide to join the people of Israel was a huge leap. This is kind of like saying somebody who used to be part of a hate group has now decided to convert to Judaism. It is a shocking person to pick as the archetype of somebody who chooses Judaism. But we learn a lot from how Ruth chooses to become Jewish, as she is joining with Naomi, that's her mother-in-law, as they are returning from Moab and coming back to Israel. Naomi tells her, just go home. I can't help you anymore because I've got more sons to give you as husbands because the previous guys had died. And Ruth says, that doesn't matter. I'm coming with you. I should also point out there was another woman named Orpah who was Oprah. Her mother misspelled it when she was doing the birth certificate, but the actual biblical name is Orpah. And she did go back once Naomi said, go on home. She did choose to return home, but Ruth did not. Ruth came with her back to the land of Israel, and their dialogue tells us a lot. So Naomi tries to explain to her. She says, it is prohibited for us to go beyond the Shabbat limit. That is to say, to travel too far. What do we mean by that? Well, Ruth responded, where you go, I shall go. So what's happening here in this midrash, taken from the Talmud, is all the little words that Ruth gives, where you go, I will go, where you sleep, I will sleep, where you die, you will die, are actually responding to Naomi teaching her what Judaism is about. So Naomi is implying about the Shabbat limits of travel, and Ruth is agreeing, fine, where you go, I'll go. She explains it's forbidden for us to be alone together with a forbidden man, with someone we're not allowed to be with. Where you lodge, wherever you sleep, I will sleep, right? She's saying, I agree to that rule as well. Let me just make sure that isn't technical help. Nope. Naomi also said to her, we are commanded 613 mitzvot. Ruth responds, your people, they'll be my people, meaning I will accept all of the rules of your people. Naomi said to her, idolatrous worship is forbidden to us. Ruth responds, your God is my God. Naomi said to her, 4 types of capital punishment were handed over to a court, meaning they're allowed to carry out executions. And Ruth says, where you die, I shall die. Meaning if those are the rules and I violate one, then I accept that that will be the punishment that I will receive. Naomi said to her, 2 burial grounds were handed over to the court, one for those executed for more severe crimes and one for lesser crimes. It's something we talk about in our Mishnah class on Wednesday, but suffice it for tonight. And Ruth responds, where you bury, where you die and where you are buried, there I shall be buried. Meaning I accept all of your rules and conditions. Now, Ruth is this most famous person who converts in the entire Tanakh. Her full speech, which is more beautiful when it's not cut up with explanation, goes as follows. Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and to not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me if anything but death parts me from you. It is an incredibly impassioned plea to Naomi to say that Ruth wants to be Jewish. She wants to be part of the Israelite people. She wants to be part of God and Torah and all that is involved. And that spirit is really the spirit that we have tried to look for people that are choosing to convert to Judaism ever since, for the last 2,000, almost 3,000 years. How are we doing? Okay. So Ruth continues in a different teaching. This is in the Midrash for Ruth. Ruth replies, do not urge me to leave you. Well, what does urge or hurt literally in the Hebrew mean? Well, Ruth said to Naomi, Ruth says to her mother-in-law, do not sin against me by telling me to leave and return from following you. I intend to convert anyway, and it is better that I do it with you than with someone else. So she is trying to say, look, I'm going to be Jewish. If you tell me to leave you, I'll have to find some other way, right? But that's going to be harder or more difficult, or maybe I won't find the right person to work with. Let me come with you. Because if you push me away too hard, then you're actually committing a transgression rather than helping me by pushing me back. Right? When Naomi heard this, she immediately began to lay out before her the laws of conversion. Naomi said, my daughter, Jewish women do not go to the non-Jewish theaters and circuses. Back then, theaters and circuses, it was not P.T. Barnum, right? And this was not like going to see Shakespeare. Theaters and circuses back then were full of both idol worship and also, a lot of blood, guts, and horrible, horrible things. Think Roman Colosseum. That was the circuses of the ancient world. Ruth said, where you go, I will go. Naomi said, my daughter, Jewish women do not live in a house where there is no mezuzah on the doorpost. Ruth said, where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people refers to warning and punishment, and your God shall be my God refers to the rest of the mitzvah. So again, Ruth, by extension, is assumed to have agreed to the whole package. And that really leads me to try and explain why we have to make this work. But before we do that, there's just one last little bit that I want to explain from Ruth, where Rabbi Elazar says, what is the verse for which this ruling, that we are not over-demanding of converts and do not over-teach? Where is it derived? As it is written, and when she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left off speaking with her. Meaning, once the conviction of a person is 100% clear, then we do not need to continue to badger them with more information, more details, and more possible rejection. And that tension is really what has characterized Jewish conversion ever since, is we want people to know what they are getting into, and we also want them to be glad that they are getting into it. But we don't want to deceive them. We don't want to hide the requirements and what a Jewish life looks like. We also don't want to overly discourage people from becoming Jewish. It is a very delicate balancing act that we try to perform when someone comes to us and says they would like to convert. And throughout history, this has been balanced one way or the other of more inviting and more discouraging depending upon the historical circumstances. So for example, during the time of King David, the sages taught that converts are not accepted, right? During the time of the Messiah, who is a descendant of David, as well as during the time of David and Solomon themselves, no one was allowed to convert. Why was that the case back then? Because it was too encouraging. I mean, you see this rising glory of King David, you see King Solomon and his wisdom and his wealth, and you think, all right, I'm going to hook my wagon to this horse. This is the champion. These are the winners. And then everything falls apart, right? So if people were to join Judaism because they thought this was like a business opportunity, or because they thought this would make them more successful or more powerful, then they're not joining for the right reason. And when there are hard times in history, their connection and their conviction, it's going to fade. And so during this time, Judaism looked too good. And therefore, for just that brief window, we said, no one can convert, because right now you're getting a false impression of what Judaism involves, right? Because it's going to be ups and there are going to be downs. And if you're only here during the ups, then that's not really connecting to Judaism. Make sense? Maybe? Okay. During the Roman period, there were actually many converts. This was a time when Judaism was the fastest growing religion in the Roman Empire. And there were so many people who wanted to become Jewish, and that was fine. And they did it even though the Roman Empire often treated Jews very badly. And when you compare what Judaism offered to the average person compared to what Rome was offering the average person, it wasn't as stark as David and Solomon, but it was clear that you could see that Judaism was more humane, that Judaism was more fair, and that Judaism had a theology, a belief in God, that was just so much more advanced than the ideas that the Romans had about their gods. So it was natural that people would be drawn and attracted to Judaism despite some of those hurdles. During the Middle Ages, however, there weren't just hurdles, there were barriers. In both Christian Europe as well as the Muslim Middle East, most of the time we were not allowed to accept converts. Literally, it was against the law. And if a rabbi was to help somebody convert, both the rabbi, the person who converted, and often many of the other members of that town would be killed. It was literally death to accept people to convert, because in both Christian and Muslim worlds, although they tolerated the Jews, they believed that our path was wrong. And therefore, if anybody was brought into our path, we were making things worse for them. And so therefore, they made it illegal for us to let someone become Jewish. There still were a few handful cases of conversion at the time, but by and large, it was very rare in most of those countries, depending again on who was in charge of them. Sometimes they didn't pay so much attention to what we were doing. Sometimes they would crack down very hard. And so this created a suspicion of converts, because if someone knew that converting to Judaism would mean their death, why are they asking me to convert them? Are they a spy? Right? Are they trying to trick me? And there were cases where people would do that. They would try to come in and say, hey, Rabbi, I want to become Jewish. And then the rabbi would say, well, okay, I guess maybe we can do this. And they go, aha, got you. And, off to jail or worse. So there was a period during most of the Middle Ages where Jews were very suspicious of people who came asking to convert, and would do it only under rare circumstances. Got the history?
Yes.
Okay. So let's get down to the brass tacks. How does this actually work? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Once somebody is aware of what they need to know, and once someone feels that they are truly committed to Judaism, the process of making them be Jewish, the actual moment of conversion, is pretty straightforward. One, if it's a man, they need to be circumcised, what we call brit milah. That's the removal of the outer skin at the tip of the male part. And if they were already medically circumcised, which in America, it's still quite common for even non-Jewish men to be circumcised when they are babies, But if they did that long before they planned to be Jewish, when they were a baby, we still have a ceremony where a small drop of blood is taken from that place. We call that hatafat dam brit. So if somebody's a man, they have to have the foreskin removed, and if it's already gone, there's a little like lancet, like for when you do a blood test, and just a tiny drop of blood. It's not that bad, and I've watched it be done many times, and the buildup and worry is much worse than the actual procedure. Now, for an adult male to go through circumcision, that does take a longer recovery. The ceremony itself is straightforward, but it does, yes, that is an issue. Once that's been done, for both men and women, there needs to be the acceptance of the obligation of the commandments, what we call ol hamitzvot, which means the yoke of commandments. Yoke, like the thing a cow has when it's pulling for the cart, the wooden thing that goes around its neck. We say that's what God has given us, right? We are God's animals, and when we follow the commandments, we are pulling the plow. We are changing the earth. We direct our strength the same way that with an animal, if you put the yoke on them, that lets their strength do something constructive. So if you accept that before a court, what we call the Beit Din. Court is a very fancy word, and it's also a very scary word for many people. This is not a court like the Supreme Court. This is a court meaning a representation of the community. There are 3 people, and there are questions, not trick questions, but more about one's sincerity and one's general understanding and awareness of what Judaism is and what it asks of us, and that the person is agreed that they will, to the best of their ability, fulfill those commandments. Once all that's ready, which this usually happens a while before, but this and this happen usually on the same day, then the person is immersed in a kosher water source, what we call a mikveh. And the mikveh in this city we use is over at Ohev Shalom, which is off Maitland Boulevard, and it looks like a really big jacuzzi. It's a very big bath kind of thing, and I'll talk about how that works physically in just a second. But those are the 3 steps. There has to be circumcision, there has to be the Beit Din acceptance of the commandments, and there has to be the immersion in the mikveh. Any questions on those 3?
Yes.
Yes.
With the male circumcision, they cannot go for a doctor?
Oh, yes, they can. Of course, yes. For circumcision, yes.
It's not a routine, like a ceremony?
So there's not much that needs to be done at that point. I happen to work with a guy who's down actually in South Florida, who helps me when a man needs to be circumcised from scratch. But if somebody had a doctor that they prefer to work with, what we usually will do is they'll have the circumcision, and then we'll do the hatafat dam brit after the circumcision has healed. So sometimes we'll just let them do it medically, and then we'll do the hatafat dam brit afterwards. We'll do the drop. So, but if it's being done by a Jewish doctor or by a Jewish doctor with a rabbi in attendance, then we can do it with the full circumcision, and I've been there for those too. So, but the ceremony is not complicated. It's, boom, you're done. Any other questions on this page?
So that's the second and the third one, we do it together in one day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. And that's for women and men.
Yep. This is for everyone. Exactly. This is for everyone. Okay. So let's talk about those different points. Brit Milah, circumcision. Circumcision has been a requirement for being part of the Jewish people since Abraham, which means all the way back to the very beginning. A man has to be circumcised to become Jewish, and there's no exception to that. If someone were to come to me and say, I want to be Jewish, but I can't be circumcised, or I won't be circumcised, I'd say, okay, I'm sorry. Have a great life. I'm happy to teach you about Judaism. I'm happy to teach you about God, but you can't become Jewish without that part of the ritual. Now, many babies who are not Jewish, as I mentioned, have already been circumcised for medical or other family preference, and therefore we do the drop of blood that is taken from the site, and we do that as to make it into a Brit Milah, because a medical circumcision is not the same as the covenantal circumcision, right? You can do the same job, but doing it with two different intentions makes a big difference. Think of it as lighting candles because you want to have a romantic dinner, and lighting candles because you want to welcome Shabbat. Those are the same acts, strike the match, touch the wick, it lights up with a lovely little flame, but the intention, the blessing, the feeling that goes into it is very different. And so we do need something to convert that medical circumcision into a covenantal circumcision, into Brit Milah. A convert, and this is taken from Shulchan Aruch, from Jewish law code, Middle Ages, a convert that enters to join the Jewish people is obligated in circumcision. If he was already circumcised when he was an idol worshiper, or he was born circumcised, that is possible. Some men are born without the foreskin. It is necessary to draw blood from it and not bless. There's no fancy blessing for that moment. Were it not for the blood of the covenant, the heaven and the earth would not be able to stand. As it says, were it not for my brit, my covenant, day and night, I would not have placed the laws of heaven and earth. So what the tradition is reading from this line in Jeremiah 33 is that the idea of circumcision is this is one of the pillars, one of the foundations. This is one of the main supports for our identity and our cohesion as a people, and therefore our ability to perform Torah, which is the reason why we have a world. Right? If God did not believe that Torah could exist, and if God did not believe that Torah could make the world into a better place, God would not have made the world. Right? It's one of the things that gives me hope whenever I see bad news, is that no matter how bad the news is, if this was going to be the end, if there was going to be no more humanity, no more world, God would not have started. Right? God knows how it's going to finish, so God wouldn't have begun if he thought it was going to finish badly. It might take a long time to get there, and sometimes I wonder how long, but definitely I know we will get there. And this is a reminder that with Brit Milah, we are also saying we'll get there, and we are willing to make this sacrifice. We're willing to make this sign on our own bodies that we will be there, and that God indeed has a plan for heaven and earth, and we are part of it. Good? Good. Accepting the commandments, what a person will formally do before the court, the Beit Din. The yoke of the commandments, the Ol HaMitzvot, is a key part of converting. Since Judaism believes that a person can live a good life and be connected to God, and they can do that without being Jewish, then accepting the mitzvot as laid out of the Torah is essential. Like I said, Judaism doesn't say our way is the only way. That's not a Jewish idea. Judaism says God is the only way, and you can worship God and be connected to God and be a good and righteous, wonderful person and not be Jewish. That is absolutely possible, and we are thankful for people like that. And as we talked about from the afterlife episode, those people also have a share in Olam Haba. They have a full measure of the afterlife. Everything is good, right? So that's why we don't go around telling everyone to become Jewish, because why would I force someone to become Jewish when they could be connected to God in their own way? That means if you want to be Jewish, however, that you have to actually be Jewish, right? Being Jewish doesn't mean connected to God. Being Jewish means being connected to God through Torah. And that means you have to be willing to accept what it means to be connected to God in this way. So, like Ruth, the convert has to accept all that goes along with the commandments, the limits, the requirements. They have to accept that the community will also decide many of the details according to their leadership and traditions. That last part, again, can be awfully hard for some people. A lot of people, especially who have been studying on their own, have their own feelings, their own preferences, their own ideas. But being part of a community means sometimes if the community wants to do the service this way, that's the way we'll do the service. If the community wants to celebrate a holiday this way, that's the way we'll be celebrating now. Thankfully, if you find the community is really going in a direction you're not comfortable, there are other communities. But being part of a community is essential in Judaism, because that's the only way we can truly be connected to all of the commandments in their fullness. Accepting the yoke doesn't mean that a convert has to know every detail of every commandment. Very important. No one is asking anyone to memorize the Torah or to memorize a law book. That's not the idea. It also doesn't mean that they have to swear that they would never make a mistake or that they would never make a transgression, because we all will. Everybody does, right? That's why God gave us tshuva, the Jewish word for repentance, and it's why God gave us most especially Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when all of our mistakes can be fixed, or when we are reminded that all of our mistakes can be fixed. So we cannot ask someone to be perfect before they become Jewish. All that we say is that you accept fully that the commandments are commandments, right? They're not suggestions, they're not good ideas, they're not recommendations, they are actual commandments. This is what the law is, and that he or she will try as hard as possible to fulfill them, to keep them. That's what we mean when we say, do you accept the commandments? And if someone is willing to say yes to that, I am willing to accept that the commandments are the commandments, and that I have learned enough of them to know what I'm talking about, and that I will do my best to be able to fulfill them to the best of my knowledge, that's what it means to accept the Torah. Make sense? And that's one of the reasons why we have these classes. Because, technically I could just say, do you accept the Torah? And you say yes, and I say, great, let's go to the mikveh. And there would be a problem there, because what are you agreeing to? Right? Did you read the fine print? Or are you just clicking on the accept now, button without reading the in-user, license agreement? And we don't want to do that, because in Judaism, we believe that once a person is officially Jewish, there's no exit, right? It's like once you're part of the family, you're part of the family. And you can join or leave a gym. You can become a fan of a particular sports team and then stop being a fan of that particular sports team. That's fine, no problem. Once you're Jewish, there's no exit. There's no way out, which we will talk about. But first, we have to talk about what it means when we say how you have to learn these commandments. So this first section here was taken from the Talmud. And back then, they had a slightly different style. No PowerPoint presentations, no YouTube, no huge libraries full of books. They had books, but not everyone had access to them. And so what did they say? Well, if someone wants to convert, they inform him of some of the lenient mitzvot and some of the stringent mitzvot. And they inform him of the sin of gleanings, forgotten sheaves, the corners, and the poor man's tithes. These are all different forms of how you help somebody who is poor when most of the people around you are farmers. They say to him, be aware that before you came to this status and converted, had you eaten forbidden fat, a particular part of the animal's stomach fat that was used in the sacrifices, and therefore not allowed for just regular, lunch, you would not be punished by karet. Karet means spiritual excision. You are cut off spiritually if you violate that particular commandment. Had you profaned Shabbat, you would not have been punished by stoning. But now, if you have eaten forbidden fat, you are punished by karet, and if you have profaned Shabbat, you are punished by stoning. So these are used as examples. You'll notice they're not teaching everything. Their curriculum's a lot shorter than mine, because that was considered acceptable in the ancient world, because they had a community that a person was going to be part of and probably already was part of, that they would know what Jews did, and they would be able to constantly learn easily from everyone around them. Nowadays, when most of us live in our own homes and we're working in our own jobs and we don't see each other except for maybe once or twice a week, and we don't always see how everything is going on in everyone's life, learning is a lot harder. We have to use a lot more books and a lot less communication between people. So our requirements are a little bit more wordy than the requirements in the ancient world. And they went on to say, and just as they have informed him of the punishment of the mitzvot, so too they inform him about the reward granted for them. They say to him, be aware that the world to come, Olam Haba, is made only for the righteous, and the Jewish people at the present time are unable to receive not an abundance of good, nor an abundance of woe. Meaning, stuff isn't really great for us right now, and stuff will not be horrible for us right now, completely horrible, because we do need to continue. And they do not overwhelm him with threats, and they are not exacting with him about the details of the mitzvot. So this was the ancient balance during the times of the Talmud, which was to say, here are some of the commandments, and look, you're going to have to give up stuff, and if you don't, there are some pretty heavy consequences. And it's not like you couldn't just keep going on, right? You eat the fat, break Shabbat. If you're not Jewish, that's fine. No one cares. If you become Jewish, we're going to care, and God's going to care. So, think about this. But if you do, yeah, being Jewish is pretty good, right? Being Jewish is a nice thing. And we understand why you might want to be Jewish. So no, not too much threats, not too much reward, not too much detail, not too little detail. That was the balance they tried to use. And if he accepts upon himself all of the ramifications, then they circumcise him immediately. They were talking about a male in this particular case. Okay, which is why we end up with eventually an almost a custom in many communities of pushing someone away, of not accepting them immediately when they show up saying they would like to be Jewish. Again, since good people who are not Jewish are still called righteous, we are not in the business of going out and bringing people in. Right? We often try to test commitment by pushing back. You'll notice from me that I don't push people away, but I do let people drift away during conversion. So if somebody is converting and they stop coming to class, I'm not going to go knock on your door. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say, where'd you go? Come back. We miss you. You got to keep studying. If you've decided not to come, I'm not going to drag you back to this room. If you've decided that you're not committed today, but maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe 5 years from now, and you want to come back then, that's also okay. I'm always open to have a discussion if someone is feeling like they want to talk to me about where they are and the progress they're making and how they feel their journey is going. But I don't hunt people down to make them Jewish. I am there to support anyone on their journey. I'm not there to push anyone on their journey. The sages taught, in fact, though, that a convert who comes to convert at the present time, meaning in the ancient days, they say to him, what did you see that you come to convert? Don't you know that the Jewish people at the present time are anguished, suppressed, despised, harassed, and the hardships are visited upon them? Right? We make sure they know. Have you noticed they have this thing called anti-Semitism? Have you noticed the way Jews in some parts of the world are treated? Have you noticed, for example, in the modern times that anti-Semitism is still the largest share of hate crimes that are connected to religions in this country, I mean, the United States? Mm-hmm. Do you notice that anti-Semitism and hate groups have grown by about 180% over the last year? Do you recognize that if you become Jewish, you join their target list? Right? We have always tried to make sure people knew that. And if the person says, I know, and I am worthy to, then we accept them immediately. I mean, if the person says, yeah, I know it's bad, and I still want to join and I still realize that Judaism is a wonderful and amazing thing, and I'm not worthy to demand it, but I want to. Okay, you know what? That's the spirit, because that's how we feel too. Yes, all those statistics are depressing and are miserable, and I wish they would change. But I still think that it's better to be Jewish than not. I mean, it's my experience to say that being Jewish is a wonderful thing, and it's definitely worth all the hardships and difficulties that sometimes the world throws at us. But I don't expect someone on the outside to always agree to that. And I'm certainly not going to try to convince them if they're not interested in being convinced. Good? Mm-hmm. Good. We also want to check someone's motivation, right? So you have all the knowledge, you understand what it is to do and how to do kashrut and how to do business and how to do speech and all the things that we need to do to keep the commandments and do it right. But why, right? Are you motivated out of love and dedication to God, to Torah, and the Jewish people? That is also a question. So again, our sages say, when a convert comes to convert, check after him, right? Perhaps it's because of money he took. Right? Maybe he's got like an outstanding debt and he thinks if he converts, he can somehow like cancel the loan or do something. Or because of the power that she'll gain. Maybe she thinks that becoming Jewish is going to help her career. Or because of fear. And that was a big question during this story of Purim that I mentioned at the very beginning, of whether the people who were becoming Jewish were doing it because they realized that Judaism was amazing, or whether they were afraid the Jews would come and get them, which wasn't really a possibility, but that doesn't stop people from still thinking and being afraid. And if they have placed their eyes on a Jewish person to wed, and saying basically, oh, I want to be Jewish because he is so cute. And if I become Jewish, I'm going to get him, right? These are things that are problems, right? And if you did not find such a cause, inform them of the weight of the yoke of the Torah and the difficulty of fulfilling it on the nations of the world in order that they leave. If they accept and do not leave, and you see them that they are turning out of love, accept them. Right? That is our ultimate answer, which is make sure there's no weird reason they're doing this. And then if they still want to do it, we got it, right? That means they're coming for the right reason. However, Shulchan Aruch continues, if you did not check after him, or you did not inform him of the rewards of the commandments and their punishments, and he was circumcised and immersed before 3 ordinary people, this is a convert. So the correct way is to inform them of everything. The correct way is to check about their motivation. But even if you didn't, that is to say, even if someone showed up and said, I want to be Jewish, and I said, sure, why not? Let's go to the mikveh. And we took them there, and I threw them in the mikveh. And let's imagine we didn't even have a rabbi, right? Just 3 regular Jewish folks. The guy comes out, or the gal, and then someone says, well, wait a minute, did you ask them any questions? Did you check anything? I mean, I know you did the circumcision. I know you did the mikveh. I know you had 3 people there, but did you check her? And we say, no, we didn't check anything. They're still Jewish, right? We do things the right way. We do things the right way from the beginning. But if they hadn't been done correctly, the person would still be Jewish. Even if you informed that they are because of something, like the things we mentioned before, the other meanings, that he converted, since he was circumcised and was immersed, he has left the category of idol worshippers, and we are worried for him until his righteousness is clarified. And even if he returns and serves idols, he is like an apostate Israelite. So imagine the timeline, somebody who worships idols shows up one day, 3 guys say, hey, oh, you want to be Jewish today? Sure. Quick circumcision, quick immersion, everybody's there, it's happy. And then next week, he's back worshiping idols. When he's worshiping idols next week, he is a Jewish person worshiping idols, which is not a good thing, but he is still Jewish. He is still officially Jewish, and now we're even more upset about him worshiping idols than before he became Jewish, because now he's one of us worshiping idols. Now he's part of our family, and we're disappointed. But we can't revoke his Jewishness. Now, this has become a bit of a political hot potato, especially in the state of Israel. But you can see the Jewish law is very, very clear that if you take politics out of it, somebody who converts, even if it's not ideally, but as long as they have the circumcision, some form of acceptance in front of the court, as well as the immersion, then their status is clear. They are Jewish, right? Now, again, I want to make sure that none of the silliness happens here. So I make sure that everyone knows what they're getting into. I make sure that we do this all in the correct way from the start. But there really is no way to second guess a conversion once it's happened, which is also why I always want to make sure there's enough time for a person to think about it before we rush them off to the mikveh. Good? Mm-hmm. Okay. What happens if it's a kid? Right now, you don't get a lot of 5-year-olds coming to the rabbi and saying, Rabbi, I want to be Jewish. That doesn't happen all that often. But what you do often get is a family where one spouse is Jewish and one spouse isn't. Now, if the mother is not Jewish, then that means when a child is born, the child is not Jewish. But mother and father may agree that they want to raise that child Jewishly, and therefore they want to convert the child to make them officially Jewish. Another case can be where there is adoption. If you have 2 Jewish parents who want to adopt a child, and the child they're adopting was not born Jewish, they want the child to be Jewish, so the child can be raised Jewish and live a Jewish life. So we have conversion of a minor. So a minor who is non-Jew, if he has a father, the father can convert him, or his mother, because it is a merit to him. And we can give merit to him outside of his choice. Basically, what this is saying is being Jewish is basically a positive thing. And you can always do something positive for a kid, even if the kid doesn't agree to it. You know, that's why we take kids to the dentist. Even if they don't like it, we know that going to the dentist is better for the kid in the long term than not going to the dentist. and therefore we can do it over their objections if they have any, because they're a kid. What do they know? Whether he is a minor who is converted on behalf of his father, or whether he is converted by a court when he is older, he can protest his conversion. We don't treat him the way we would treat an adult convert. He is not like an apostate, rather like a non-Jew. And what is this talking about? As soon as he becomes an adult, which means basically 13 these days, and acts in accordance with the practices of Israel, he can no longer protest his conversion. So what this is trying to say is, you have a child, whether it's an infant, an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, you take them to the mikveh, you do the immersion, the same thing that you would do for an adult. When they turn 13, they get one day to say, I don't want to be Jewish. And if they say, I don't want to be Jewish on that one day, then they're no longer Jewish. But if they spend that day and they live that day as a Jewish person, they're now Jewish forever. Done. We're not going to revisit this ever again. And he or she never has to worry that someone will question their Jewishness in the future. And that's really what we're trying to talk about here, right? The adult convert, we don't wait and see if he changes his mind 13 years down the road. Once he has done it as an adult, it's permanent, done, right? No take-backsies. It's done. That happens for the child once they've lived that one day as a Jewish person, because the community did not want there to ever be suspicion about people who were converted. Once a person who was converted, they should be accepted as a full and permanent member of the community. Yes, they may have their ups and they may have their downs, but they are permanently one of us now. And if you didn't have this law, then you'd have people saying, well, yeah, I know he seems good now, but maybe in 10 years he might go back to worshiping the idols. So we'll wait and see. I don't want to. Nope. Once he's in and equal to the rest of us. Okay. Immersion. How does this work? Well, first of all, we know that all the rest of us had to immerse. When we were at Mount Sinai, there was also a immersion before we received Torah. And since all the rest of us had to immerse, so does anybody else who converts, right? It's just catching you up with the rest of the Jewish people. So the rest of us had to go to the mikveh too. We just did it 3,000 years ago. We're still a little wet. They immerse him immediately, and 2 Torah scholars stand over him and inform him of some of the lenient mitzvot and some of the stringent mitzvot. Once he has immersed and emerged, he is like a Jew in every sense, right? 100% true. For a woman, women seat her in the water up to her neck, and 2 Torah scholars stand outside. And from there, they inform her of some of the lenient mitzvot and some of the stringent mitzvot, etc., etc., etc. What the second part here is trying to point out is that the male members of the Beit Din, of the court, don't watch the naked woman go into the water and then come out of the water, right? That would not be appropriate at all. If you do choose to finalize and go through conversion, I'll explain to you exactly how we handle it at the facility over at the synagogue, but there's no watching of naked people. We don't do that. You laugh. There are some places in the world where that would be the normal thing, but not in Judaism and not for a few thousand years. Okay. We're running out of time. All right. When you go in for the immersion, a person has to wash and clean themselves well before they go to the mikveh. Right? The mikveh is not a bath. The mikveh is not where you get clean. The mikveh is not where you got soap and your washcloth and all. No, you do that before. Shower before, clean everything, hair, body, nails, and all of the stuff underneath, and all the jewelry, hairbands, makeup, hair extensions, piercings, bandages, anything else that comes between you and the water has to be removed before going in. And when you're in the water, the person has to go completely under so that the water is over their head, and lift their feet up so the water is under them as well, so that a person is surrounded. And we don't clench up, right? We don't hold our arms like this. It has to be loose so that the water can get all around us. Make sense? Right? The whole idea is to be completely covered, at least for an instant, all around, all at once. Good. We'll cover the blessings another time because we're running out of time. Status. A convert is equal in all ways to a native-born Jew. They have the same rights and responsibilities. The only distinction the Torah ever talked about was the prohibition on a convert marrying a Kohen, was the convert marrying somebody who was part of the priestly family. That was based on the assumption that all women who came from non-Jewish communities were sexually promiscuous, that they fooled around. They would sleep with anybody, anywhere, anytime. And the Kohanim did not want women like that to be married into their families. Now, nowadays, well, since 1961 at least, the conservative movement has said, that's not what most non-Jewish women are like these days. Yes, back in the days of idolatry, maybe that's what they were like. I don't know. But nowadays, that's not what women are like if they're not Jewish. So therefore, we do allow people who convert to marry a Kohen as well. But that is a position of the conservative movement. You will find that in the Orthodox world, they would still not allow a convert to marry a Kohen. So a small point, but just interesting. One last thing to say about conversion. Everything we've said so far is about religion, about Judaism. However, the state of Israel adds a political element as well. And the state of Israel has complicated politics, very, very complicated politics. But as I said before, I want to tell everybody the fine print. This is how things happen at the moment. This could happen, this could change next month, this could change in 5 years, this could change in 20 years. I cannot predict the future. But as of today, 2019, before the next April election, the current law in Israel says that if somebody converts outside of Israel, meaning you convert in the US, you convert in England, you convert in Brazil or wherever, but not in Israel. In Israel, there are different laws. But if you convert outside of Israel, the person will be eligible for Aliyah. That means they can make Aliyah, they can become a citizen of Israel. They will probably face additional scrutiny and have to provide more paperwork to prove that not only did they convert, but they were part of a community and things like that. Mm-hmm. That is an additional hurdle, but the person can be given citizenship in Israel. However, they will most likely, and by most likely I mean 99% sure, probably not, be registered as Jewish officially. Right? In Israel, that status is set by the Rabbanut, which are rabbinic courts that are state funded. So it's very different than the US, where we have separation of religion and state. In Israel, many things are under the official rule of the rabbinic courts. And one of those is the status of somebody, of whether they are Jewish or not. The secular government will let you in. The rabbinic courts will not admit that you are Jewish. Even Orthodox conversions that were done outside of Israel will often be rejected. They just are very, very particular in who they support politically. Like I said, this has a lot less to do with religion than it does to do with politics. But that does mean that if somebody converts, they can actually become a citizen, but they couldn't get married in Israel if they weren't already married. They can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery in Israel. They could never adopt a child while they were living in Israel. There would always be a distinction between them and the people that are officially registered as Jewish. This is a problem. In my opinion, it's also a great embarrassment and shame, and it should be changed, and it may be changed, but I don't know when. And this is an ongoing issue of trying to normalize the status, not only of people who converted, but many people who have Jewish history, but don't have the papers to prove that they were Jewish. Many people, for example, from the former Soviet Union have this problem, and hundreds of thousands of them live in Israel, and they are between camps. They want to be Jewish, they act Jewish, they live Jewishly, but they're not officially registered as Jewish. Mm-hmm. And the process of converting in Israel is even more crazy. So they cannot officially change their status to be Jewish. So this is a problem, but it's not one that will affect you unless you choose to live in Israel. You can still visit Israel as a tourist and go there and do all the wonderful touristy things, and it's great. I think we may even have a slot left on our trip to Israel this summer. But I do believe in full disclosure, and I want to make sure that people understand the political side of what is currently the law in Israel. It could change, and it could get a lot better. And to be honest, it could also get a lot worse. At some point in the future, the political system, the balance of parties could change, And it could be that people who converted outside of Israel may not even be allowed to come and be citizens. I don't know. But like I said, I wanted to be fair and make sure people knew. So if you were planning to convert so that you could go to Israel and get married, we can have a longer conversation because that may not be possible in the way that you're dreaming. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't want to end on a down note, but like I said, I've got to tell you all the facts before a person can make an informed decision. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of Purim until the sun goes down and the new day begins.